It was a warm summer morning in June of 1997 when the Miller family set out on what was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. John Miller, a 42-year-old accountant, had meticulously planned the trip, mapping out trails, stocking up on supplies, and checking the weather multiple times to ensure everything went smoothly. His wife, Karen, a school teacher with a love for nature, packed lunches, blankets, and even a few board games to entertain the kids during downtime. Their two children, Lily, 10, and Max, 7, were buzzing with excitement, chattering about the animals they might see, the streams they would wade through, and the little adventures they would have along the trail. The family left behind a cozy suburban home that morning, cheerful and seemingly unaware that their lives were about to take a terrifying turn. Neighbors remember seeing the Millers loading their car at dawn, their station wagon stacked neatly with hiking gear, tents, and camping chairs. Lily was holding her stuffed rabbit, her favorite companion, while Max bounced around impatiently, asking when they would finally hit the trail. John made a point to check the map one last time, ensuring they knew every checkpoint and potential detour. Karen double-checked the kids' backpacks, tucking extra snacks and water bottles inside. The mood was light, filled with the laughter of a family that seemed perfectly ordinary. Yet that very ordinary morning would become the last time anyone saw them alive. By mid-morning, the Millers had reached the trailhead of a remote section of the Appalachian Trail, miles away from any main road. The parking lot was quiet except for a few hikers and the rustling of leaves in the wind. John and Karen waved goodbye to the hikers they passed, promising to return by Sunday evening. They seemed confident, cheerful, and careful, taking note of trail markers and planning a route that would circle back to their car. No one could have guessed that as they disappeared into the dense forest, something sinister might already be lurking, waiting in the shadows, or perhaps the forest itself would become a trap too clever to leave any trace behind. As the day wore on, the Millers followed winding paths through towering pines and thick underbrush. They stopped occasionally to take photos, dip their feet into a cool stream, or spot birds and deer. John took the lead, making sure the path was clear, while Karen encouraged the children to explore safely along the edges of the trail. The sounds of the forest, chirping birds, rustling leaves, distant running water, mixed with the happy chatter of the family. It was a perfect day on the surface, yet the deeper they went into the wilderness, the more isolated and removed they became from civilization. With each step, the trail seemed to stretch farther into a world where help would be almost impossible to reach. Evening approached, and the forest began to darken as shadows lengthened. The Millers had planned to camp overnight at a small clearing near a creek, a familiar spot according to the map John had studied. They set up a modest campsite, unpacked their gear, and prepared a light dinner. Karen recounted stories by the fire, while Lily and Max played neighbor, tossing small rocks and sticks into the stream. Everything seemed normal, idyllic even, but as darkness fell, the forest took on a different character. The comforting sounds of wildlife now mingled with eerie rustlings, whispers of wind that sounded almost like voices. It was the last evening the Miller family would spend together, and no one outside the forest had any idea of the nightmare that would soon begin. As Monday morning arrived, worry quickly turned into panic. The Miller family had not returned, and calls to their home went unanswered. Their neighbors, initially thinking they might have stayed with friends or gotten delayed, soon realized something was wrong when the children's school confirmed Lily and Max hadn't shown up. By mid-morning, concerned friends alerted local authorities, and a sense of dread began to settle over the quiet town. The police arrived, but the task ahead was daunting. The Millers had vanished somewhere along miles of rugged wilderness, and there was no sign of struggle or reason for them to disappear voluntarily. Authorities immediately organized search parties, combining local law enforcement, volunteer groups, and even the occasional hiker who had wandered those trails before. Helicopters buzzed overhead, scanning the dense canopy for movement or anything out of place. Search dogs were brought in, their noses straining to catch even the faintest scent of the missing family. Volunteers combed through trails, caves, and riverbanks, shouting names and leaving markers behind. Yet, after hours and even days of relentless searching, no trace of John, Karen, Lily, or Max could be found. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed them whole. The investigation deepened as authorities interviewed neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have seen the Millers before or after their hike. A pattern of normalcy emerged: no disputes, no financial trouble, no enemies. Everything about the family suggested they would never vanish voluntarily. Detectives began to worry. Could it have been an accident, a misadventure, or something far darker? The lack of evidence was baffling. The car, packed and untouched at the trailhead, offered no clues. It was the last tangible connection to the family, sitting silently under the sun while investigators faced a growing feeling of helplessness. Media coverage began to follow, turning the case into a local spectacle. Newspapers ran front-page stories with the headline "Family Missing on Appalachian Trail," and townspeople kept vigil at the trailhead, hoping for news. Yet, the more people looked, the more the forest seemed to mock their efforts. Rumors started circulating. Strange lights spotted in the area at night, hikers claiming to see fleeting shadows, and whispers of cursed spots along the trail. Though unverified, these stories added a layer of fear and mystery, painting the once beautiful woods as a place that might be hiding something sinister. Days turned into weeks, and despite exhaustive efforts, the official search was gradually scaled back. Volunteers dwindled, helicopters were called off, and the town slowly returned to its uneasy routine, carrying the heavy weight of unanswered questions. The forest remained silent, hiding all signs of the family as if it had never known they existed. For the Millers, the world outside was moving on, but inside those woods, something remained frozen in time, waiting for answers that no one could yet imagine. The case grew colder by the day, solidifying its place among the town's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Even after the official search had ended, the trail where the Millers vanished began to develop a reputation among hikers and locals alike. People whispered about the strange things they had seen or heard, though few dared to speak openly for fear of ridicule. Hikers reported hearing distant laughter that didn't belong to any campsite or person nearby, sometimes the sound of children giggling or shouting, echoing through the trees in places that had no clear path. Those who paused to investigate often found nothing, but the laughter always seemed to fade only when they turned away, leaving an unsettling emptiness in its wake. Other hikers claimed to see fleeting shadows moving between the dense trees. Some described vague figures that appeared to watch them silently, sometimes standing still at the edge of a clearing, almost like silhouettes etched into the forest itself. A few even said they had glimpsed a family-like shape, but whenever they blinked or focused on it, the vision vanished. These sightings weren't consistent or predictable, yet the sheer number of reports made it impossible to dismiss entirely. Locals began calling it the Vanishing Trail, a place where reality seemed to bend and the forest appeared alive in strange ways. Rumors began to circulate about a mysterious cabin deep in the woods, one that many believed had been abandoned for decades. Some hikers claimed to have stumbled across it, only to be overcome with a sense of dread so strong that they ran without even looking inside. Others said the cabin seemed to move, appearing in different spots along the trail, always hidden among dense thickets. The stories described windows that seemed to glint unnaturally in the sunlight, doors that creaked even when the wind was still, and shadows that lingered longer than they should have. These accounts were never verified, but they fueled the growing legend surrounding the disappearance of the Miller family. Even local wildlife seemed to behave oddly around the trail. Dogs brought along by hikers would sometimes refuse to enter certain areas, barking at nothing visible, their fur standing on end. Birds would fall silent suddenly, and streams that were usually calm would ripple unnaturally as if disturbed by invisible forces. People began to notice that compasses sometimes malfunctioned in specific sections of the trail, and GPS signals flickered or dropped altogether, adding to the feeling that the forest itself was keeping secrets. Each story added another layer of unease, making it clear that this was no ordinary hike or ordinary forest. Over the years, these strange sightings created an aura of fear and fascination around the trail. Adventurers, thrill-seekers, and paranormal enthusiasts began to flock there, drawn by curiosity and the hope of experiencing the unknown firsthand. Some returned with vivid tales of encounters they could not explain. Others never returned at all, their disappearances only adding to the forest's terrifying reputation. The combination of the unsolved case, eyewitness accounts, and unexplainable phenomena made the Appalachian Trail a place where logic seemed to fail, and the line between reality and nightmare blurred more with every story told. Nearly 3 decades after the Miller family vanished, the forest that had swallowed them remained shrouded in mystery. In 2024, a privately funded search and recovery team decided to reopen the case, determined to uncover what decades of official investigations had failed to reveal. The team was composed of seasoned wilderness trackers, forensic experts, and former law enforcement officers, all drawn by the allure of a cold case that had haunted the Appalachian region for years. They meticulously studied old reports, maps, and photographs, looking for overlooked clues and inconsistencies, hoping that modern technology could shed light on the unsolved tragedy. The team's plan was methodical. Using high-resolution drones, thermal imaging cameras, and ground-penetrating radar, They mapped every section of the trail. They examined every clearing, every hidden ravine, and even the steep, treacherous slopes that had been deemed too dangerous in the initial search. For the first time, technology allowed them to peer into areas that had remained virtually invisible for decades. They moved cautiously, aware that the forest, with its history of strange sightings and eerie phenomena, held secrets that might still be very much alive. On the first few days, the team encountered the usual signs of wilderness, animal tracks, fallen trees, and dense underbrush, but nothing out of the ordinary. However, they began to notice subtle anomalies, places where vegetation seemed unnaturally flattened, rocks arranged in patterns that didn't appear natural, and trees with deep, almost deliberate scratches on their bark. The trackers paused to document everything, aware that even the smallest detail could provide a crucial lead. Slowly, the atmosphere grew tense, and the team members sensed that the forest wasn't just empty. It seemed aware of their presence, as if watching them. Locals in the nearby town had been following the renewed search with cautious excitement. Some came forward with tips, directions to areas that hikers had avoided, reports of strange noises, or sightings of the so-called mysterious cabin that had been mentioned for decades. The team followed these leads carefully, understanding that while rumors could be exaggerated, they often contained grains of truth in cases as bizarre as this. Each new clue built both anticipation and fear, as the forest's long-held secrets appeared to be inching closer to being revealed. By the second week of the search, the team's persistence began to pay off. Using thermal imaging during a pre-dawn sweep, they detected an unusual heat signature in a dense ravine far from any known path. When they approached, they realized it wasn't just an anomaly. It was something hidden beneath layers of moss, dirt, and overgrown vines, a structure that seemed almost deliberately concealed. For the first time in 27 years, the Miller family's story was no longer confined to rumors and legends. On the 15th day of the renewed search, the team finally reached the ravine where the unusual heat signature had been detected. The area was nearly inaccessible, surrounded by jagged rocks and thick undergrowth, the kind of place few hikers would dare to enter. As they carefully navigated the terrain, the team's eyes caught something partially hidden under a blanket of moss, a weathered wooden structure that seemed out of place in the dense wilderness. At first glance, it appeared abandoned, almost forgotten, yet the craftsmanship suggested it had once been carefully built. The air around it was heavy, still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Approaching the cabin, the team noticed details that sent shivers down their spines. The wooden planks were old and darkened by years of exposure, but some had been recently disturbed, as if someone had moved them not long ago. Near the entrance, a small backpack peeked out from under a pile of leaves, worn but distinctly belonging to a child. A closer look revealed more items, a small toy, a family photo faded and tattered, and even a notebook with pages curled and yellowed by time. Each artifact seemed frozen in the moment, a snapshot of lives abruptly interrupted, leaving the team with an eerie sense of intimacy and horror simultaneously. But the true shock awaited inside. One of the trackers noticed a loose floorboard near the back of the cabin. Kneeling, he lifted it to reveal a narrow wooden staircase leading down into darkness. The smell that wafted upward was musty and metallic, a mixture of decay and something more indefinable, something that made the hair on the team's necks stand on end. With flashlights piercing the gloom, they descended slowly, their footsteps echoing off the low ceiling. Each beam of light revealed walls lined with scratches and symbols carved deep into the wood, cryptic messages left behind by hands desperate to document the unspeakable. At the bottom of the staircase, the team found a small, hidden basement. Their flashlights illuminated objects that made their stomachs churn. Toys, clothes, and personal belongings were scattered as though someone had left in a hurry, or been forced to leave. In the far corner, the outlines of 4 skeletal bodies became visible, arranged unnaturally. It was immediately apparent that these were not the result of a simple accident. The remains were deliberately positioned, as if the occupants had been forced into compliance, and the walls of the basement told the story of their fear. Messages scratched into the wood by the family themselves, recounting days of terror and attempts to survive. The journal they found nearby offered horrifying clarity. Its pages, though brittle and yellowed, described encounters with a shadowy figure in the forest, people wearing masks who watched from the tree line, and the family's desperate efforts to escape their captor. Each entry ended with increasing desperation, a chilling timeline of events that had led to their demise. The team pored over every word, feeling the weight of decades of unanswered questions pressing down on them. The forest, once seen as a place of beauty and adventure, had concealed a nightmare in plain sight, a secret so dark it seemed almost impossible to fathom. As the search team lingered in the hidden basement, the true horror of what had occurred began to unfold. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols and frantic scratches, etched deep as though the Miller family had been compelled to leave a record of their torment. Some of the symbols resembled ancient markings, while others were simple words and pleas for help. "Please, don't let him find us. We tried, we ran, but he always sees," scrawled in uneven handwriting that shifted from calm to panicked across the pages of the old journal. It was evident that the family had been living in constant fear for days, or perhaps weeks, before their lives were violently ended. The skeletal remains confirmed the grim reality. Their positioning suggested more than death. It suggested control, manipulation, and a final, cruel message. The children's remains were close together, huddled as if for protection, while John and Karen's bodies lay in a way that seemed almost ritualistic. Nearby, the remnants of meals and makeshift bedding told a story of desperate survival. The journal described attempts to barricade the basement door, trips to the surface for water, and encounters with the figure they feared, an entity they never fully described, but whose presence haunted every line. It became chillingly clear that whatever had targeted the Millers was intelligent, methodical, and deeply malevolent. Among the most disturbing discoveries were objects that suggested the captor, or captors, had been using the family's fear for entertainment or ritual purposes. Masks, some made from rough materials, others intricately carved, were found tucked away in a corner, alongside crude implements that hinted at threats or punishment. The journal mentioned these masks, describing masked figures who would appear without warning, their intentions unclear but undeniably violent. There were sketches too, tiny, frantic drawings of shadowed figures, eyes glowing in the dark, hands reaching through the trees. It painted a terrifying image of a predator operating in plain sight, hidden by the forest's natural cover, and unseen by anyone for nearly 3 decades. The journal also revealed that the family had tried to communicate their plight to the outside world. In the earliest entries, they recorded detailed maps of the cabin's surroundings, notes on trails, and even instructions for someone to find them if they disappeared. But each plan failed. Their writings described footsteps in the woods, whispers that traveled through walls, and the constant feeling of being hunted. There was no mention of who, or what, was behind their terror, only the persistent presence of an unseen force. Every passage reinforced the chilling idea that the forest itself was complicit in hiding their torment, keeping their suffering a secret from the world above. As the team pieced together the story from the journal, the weight of decades of unanswered questions bore down on them. It was no longer just a case of a missing family. It was a story of meticulous horror, carefully concealed in the dense Appalachian wilderness. The forest, once a symbol of beauty and adventure, had become a silent accomplice to unspeakable acts. The scratches on the walls, the positioning of the remains, the journal entries, all pointed to a deliberate, horrifying plan executed long ago. And yet, despite uncovering this grim truth, the forest still seemed to hold more secrets, leaving the team to wonder just how deep the darkness really went. News of the discovery spread almost immediately, shaking the small town and captivating people across the country. Journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and curious onlookers flocked to the story, desperate to understand the unimaginable fate of the Miller family. For decades, the case had been a cold file, a tragic mystery that locals whispered about but never solved. Now, the chilling reality had been unearthed, leaving the community in shock. Every detail, the hidden cabin, the journal, the skeletal remains, was dissected in news reports, and the story became an instant sensation online, shared by millions who couldn't fathom such horror had been hiding in plain sight for 27 years. Authorities immediately began an official investigation, combing through the cabin, the surrounding forest, and the journal's clues to determine exactly what had happened. Forensic teams worked tirelessly, confirming the identities of John, Karen, Lily, and Max through DNA analysis. Experts analyzed the symbols and writings on the walls, consulting historians, cryptologists, and psychologists to understand the family's final days. Every clue seemed to point toward a premeditated and methodical torment executed by someone, or possibly a group, who had been carefully concealing the family's fate. The forest itself, dense and seemingly alive, had helped keep the secret hidden for decades. Locals who had grown up with the story felt a mixture of vindication and terror. For years, the Appalachian Trail had been shrouded in rumors of disappearances, strange sightings, and unexplained phenomena. Hikers avoided the area, and parents warned their children to steer clear of the dense forests where the Millers had vanished. Now, knowing the truth, a sense of unease settled over the town. The trail was no longer just a hiking destination. It had become a symbol of dread. The forest that had once offered adventure and solace now carried the heavy weight of tragedy, its beauty forever marred by the dark secret it had concealed. The story sparked a broader fascination as true crime communities, podcasts, and documentary filmmakers dissected every aspect of the case. They analyzed the journal, the cryptic symbols, and the family's final days, theorizing about who, or what, was responsible. Some believed it was a deranged individual, others hinted at something more supernatural, inspired by decades of eerie sightings reported in the area. The forest had become a character in its own right, a silent witness and possible accomplice to events no one could fully explain. For the public, the story was more than a tragedy. It was a chilling reminder of how darkness can linger unseen, hidden just beyond the edges of ordinary life. Even now, years after the discovery, the Appalachian Trail carries an aura of unease. The cabin remains sealed, the site protected by authorities, but the knowledge of what lies within the forest has left an indelible mark. Hikers passing nearby report sudden chills, feelings of being watched, and glimpses of shadows in their peripheral vision. For some, the story serves as a cautionary tale, a grim reminder that curiosity can be dangerous. For others, it is a fascination with the unknown, the allure of uncovering secrets hidden for decades. One thing is certain: the Miller family's disappearance, and the horrifying truth of what was found decades later, has transformed the forest into a place no one can ever view the same way again. As the forest slowly reclaims the hidden cabin and the years of secrets it held, the memory of the Miller family lingers, an echo of laughter, fear, and the unspeakable horrors that were never meant to be discovered. The trail, once a place of adventure, now stands as a silent reminder that some mysteries are darker than anyone can imagine, and some secrets are buried so deeply, even time cannot erase them. For those who walk these woods, the question remains: what else might be hidden in the shadows, waiting patiently for the next curious soul to stumble upon it? The forest has spoken, but its whispers are not done. And in the stillness, one truth remains clear: some stories never truly end, they only wait in the dark.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.